She just wanted to hug her brother at the airport. But when she felt the expensive suit and the unfamiliar fragrance, she realized that man wasn't her brother. He was a billionaire, a second's mistake, an impossible connection, and an agreement that would change everything. Savannah was invisible, Logan untouchable. But after one wrong hug, he started coming back every day, just to see who she really was. What he didn't know, her past carried a secret that could destroy his. And when the truth came to light, she had to choose: run from the one who hurt her, or trust the only man who fought for her until the very end. Get ready for a story of an unlikely love, tough choices, and an unforgettable ending. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and let us know in the comments, where are you listening to this story from? Your like helps this channel grow and keep bringing emotional stories like this one. Share with someone special. The terminal buzzed with impatient chatter, footsteps tapping over the tile floors like an orchestra of disarray. Rolling suitcases bumped into legs, children cried from fatigue, and overhead announcements echoed faintly above the blur of faces. Yet in the midst of all this movement, Savannah Reed stood completely still. She stood on her tiptoes, craning her neck as she scanned the arrivals board again, heart pounding in her chest. Her brother, Ethan, was finally coming home after 6 months working construction upstate. He hadn't said much in his last messages, just that he missed her cooking and that he'd be wearing a navy hoodie, like always. Savannah had worn her best clothes, though best was a loose term. A clean denim jacket, slightly faded jeans, and her mother's silver locket around her neck. She wasn't one to care much for appearances, but today felt different, important. Maybe because Ethan was the only family she had left since their parents passed. Maybe because she was tired of carrying the weight of everything alone. Then she saw him, a tall man, dark hair tousled from travel, walked through the crowd, pulling a small carry-on. He wore a navy hoodie, or at least a jacket in a similar shade. His shoulders were broad, his stride confident, and Savannah didn't think. She just moved. "Ethan!" she gasped, tears already pricking the corners of her eyes as she darted forward. Without hesitation, she threw her arms around him. Her body collided with something much firmer than she expected. Not her brother's usual lanky frame, and instead of the faint scent of cheap cologne and road dust she'd come to associate with Ethan, she inhaled something entirely different: sandalwood, crisp bergamot, and something darker, colder, like winter air through silk. And the fabric. Her fingers brushed over his chest and paused. Wool, thick, rich, impossibly expensive. Her eyes snapped open, her heart plummeting. This wasn't Ethan. "Oh my God," she whispered, stumbling backward, her face a flood of horror and embarrassment. "I'm so sorry, I thought you were someone else." The man blinked, startled at first, then smiled, slowly, like he hadn't smiled in a long time and didn't quite remember how. "Well?" he said, voice deep, calm, slightly amused. "If that's how you greet all strangers, I'm very honored." Savannah's cheeks burned crimson. She took another step back, tripping over the heel of her boot and barely catching herself. I'm not crazy," she stammered. "I swear. My brother's supposed to be landing right now, and you look just like him from the back, the hoodie or jacket or whatever, and She wanted to crawl into her own suitcase and disappear. But the man didn't look irritated or defensive. He looked curious. "You really thought I was your brother?" Savannah nodded miserably. He gave a soft chuckle, shaking his head. "That's a first." It was only then that she truly looked at him. He wasn't wearing a hoodie at all. It was a tailored navy trench coat, the kind only seen in movies or behind security lines. His features were sharp, elegant. His eyes, grey, almost silver, were unreadable, framed by thick lashes and shadows of fatigue. There was an air about him, something impossible to fake: poise, control, wealth. And yet he stood there in front of her, not scolding or calling security or brushing her off, but smiling at her with something between amusement and intrigue. "I'm Savannah," she blurted out, then instantly regretted it. He raised an eyebrow. "Logan," he said simply. Logan Whitmore. The name clicked somewhere in the back of her mind like a forgotten tabloid headline. Whitmore, CEO of Whitmore Holdings. Real estate, tech, something else she couldn't recall. Billionaire, private. The kind of man who didn't take public flights unless he wanted to go unnoticed. Why was he here? Why was he talking to her? "Well, Mr. Whitmore, I hope I didn't ruin your day," she muttered, eyes cast down. He took a step closer, then leaned in slightly. "Actually, you might have improved it." And just like that, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd without another word. Savannah stood frozen, watching his figure dissolve into the sea of travelers. Her chest felt tight, her palm still tingled from touching him, and her heart was thudding far too hard for someone she'd known for 32 seconds. 10 minutes later, Ethan finally arrived, hoodie and all, calling her name as he waved. Savannah hugged him tight, but her thoughts wandered. She should have let it go, should have laughed it off and moved on. But when she returned to her shift at the tiny airport cafe, wiping tables and delivering cappuccinos with tired smiles, she couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. And when Logan Whitmore walked through the cafe door, hours later, and sat quietly at a corner table without saying a word, just watching her with those unreadable grey eyes, she realized that this story was just beginning. A mistaken hug, a quiet billionaire, and a girl who had never been noticed, until now. The scent of roasted beans clung to Savannah's apron as she moved behind the counter, sleeves rolled, ponytail swaying with each hurried step. Her shift at the small airport cafe had started just after she'd reunited with Ethan, and though her feet ached and the morning rush had yet to slow, her thoughts kept drifting. To him. To the man with the trench coat and the unreadable eyes. It had been hours, and she'd replayed the moment a dozen times. The accidental hug, the way he didn't laugh at her, the way he had simply vanished. And that smile, that strange, slow, amused smile that didn't quite match the man's otherwise sharp, intimidating presence. She didn't expect to see him again. Why would she? But at 4:07 p.m. Savannah's world shifted. He walked in. She caught sight of him through the glass door, and for a second the air caught in her throat. He looked exactly as he had earlier. Impeccable coat, confident stride, but now he wasn't lost in a crowd. He was walking toward her, purposefully, as if she were the destination. Savannah straightened, pretending to check the pastry display. He entered silently, like a shadow, a presence. He didn't glance around, didn't fumble for a seat. He went straight to table 6 near the window, one of the few spots that caught the afternoon light, and sat down, folding his hands over the polished surface. She tried not to look at him, tried to focus on the coffee grinder, on the line forming, on anything but the piercing gaze she felt resting on her. Then, "Excuse me?" His voice, low and firm, carried easily over the hum of conversation. Savannah turned. He wasn't looking at the menu. He wasn't even glancing at the display. He was looking only at her. "Yes?" she asked, stepping forward. "I'd like a black coffee," he said. "But I want you to make it." Her brow furrowed. "We all use the same machine." "I didn't ask for the machine," he replied. "I asked for you." Savannah blinked, trying to process his tone. It wasn't flirty, not quite. It was serious, almost intentional, like he'd chosen his words for a reason. Still, she nodded. Coming right up. Her hands trembled slightly as she worked, measuring the grounds, tamping them with more force than usual. She had no idea what she was doing wrong or right, but whatever this was, it didn't feel like coincidence. It felt deliberate. She brought the coffee to his table, placing it gently in front of him. "Logan, right?" she asked, trying to sound casual. He looked up at her, a small smirk tugging at one corner of his mouth. "You remembered." "Well, you did introduce yourself after I assaulted you in public," she joked, a flush rising to her cheeks. He chuckled, soft, warm. "It was the most unusual greeting I've had in years. I figured I should return the favor." Savannah tilted her head. "So you came here just to have coffee made by the girl who doesn't know how to recognize her own brother?" "That," he said, picking up the cup, "and because you look like someone who doesn't pretend." She froze. Pretend? He nodded slowly, sipping the coffee. Everyone pretends in this airport. It's like a theater. People rushing around with business suits and phone calls and smiles they don't mean. But you looked real, and you hugged me like someone who feels things. Savannah didn't know what to say. Compliments were one thing, but this felt different, like he saw straight through her, beyond the apron, beyond the exhaustion, into the part of her that fought daily to survive and still kept tenderness intact. "Well," she murmured, "you must be drinking a lot of bad coffee if that's all it takes to impress you." "I don't drink much coffee," Logan replied, leaning back in his chair. "Until now." The words lingered in the air between them, and for a moment Savannah forgot the noise, the customers, the fact that her manager was probably glaring at her from the back. "Enjoy your drink," she said, stepping back. He stayed for nearly an hour, didn't open his phone, didn't ask for anything else, just sat there, sometimes watching the people pass outside, sometimes watching her. When he finally rose, placing a large tip under the saucer, Savannah approached to clear his table. But he paused, turned to her and said, "I'll be back tomorrow, same time, same table, if you'll be here." She raised an eyebrow. "Are you saying I should clear my schedule for you?" "I'm saying," he said, that slow smile returning, "I prefer my coffee made by someone who hugs before she asks questions." Then he was gone again. But this time, Savannah didn't feel like he had vanished. This time he had left something behind, a question echoing in her mind, a spark in her chest, and a sense that her world was no longer following its usual path. And the next day, at exactly 4:07 p.m., Table 6 would be waiting. Savannah hadn't meant for it to become a routine, but there it was. Every afternoon, precisely at 4:07 p.m., Logan Whitmore entered the cafe with the kind of elegance that made heads turn, though he didn't seem to notice or care. He always sat at the same table by the window. He never brought a laptop, never spoke to anyone else, and he only ever ordered one thing, a black coffee, made by her. The first few days had been surreal. She caught herself glancing at the door minutes before he arrived, pretending not to be curious. But the moment he walked in, her heart betrayed her with a traitorous little leap. It wasn't just that he was handsome, although he was. It wasn't even that he was rich. It was the way he made the rest of the world blur when he looked at her, as if she were the only person in the room. But Savannah wasn't naive. Men like him didn't orbit women like her, and yet he kept coming back. One Thursday, just as she was wiping down the counter during a quiet spell, Logan stood up and approached her instead of waiting for his coffee. "Are you free tonight?" he asked casually, as if asking about the weather. Savannah blinked, cloth frozen in her hand. "Excuse me?" "I'm inviting you to dinner," he said. "Somewhere quiet, just the two of us, no coffee involved." Her stomach twisted into a knot. This wasn't a game anymore. This wasn't harmless. She looked down at her apron, at the stain on her sleeve, at the chipped nail polish she hadn't had time to fix. And then up at him, impeccable as always, his expression unreadable but sincere. "I don't really belong in places you eat," she muttered. Logan tilted his head, studying her. "You belong anywhere you decide to walk into," she laughed quietly. "Do you rehearse these lines in the mirror?" His smile was quick, disarming. "Only when I think they might work." Savannah bit her lip. Part of her wanted to say no, keep the line between their worlds intact. But another part, the part that had been quietly aching for something more, said yes before she could stop it. "Fine," she said. "But if I end up choking on some French word I can't pronounce, I'm blaming you." "I'll take the risk," he replied. "Be ready at 7. When Savannah arrived home, she paced her small apartment for nearly an hour. Her closet was filled with jeans, work shirts, and hoodies that smelled faintly of the cafe. Nothing close to date-worthy, not for a man like him. She ended up in a simple black dress she hadn't worn in years, the one she'd used for her mother's memorial. It was modest, but flattering. She pinned her curls half up, touched her lips with soft rose, and stood in front of the mirror, heart racing. When Logan's driver texted that he'd arrived, she nearly backed out. But then she looked at her reflection again, and instead of the scared girl who barely made rent, she saw someone stronger, curious. a woman who maybe deserved to be seen. The restaurant was perched on a rooftop above the Hudson, soft jazz spilling from the speakers, warm golden lights hanging like stars above the tables, no menus, no loud conversations, just the hum of quiet elegance. Logan stood as she approached the table. His eyes swept over her, lingering for a second too long. "You look—" He paused, searching for the right word. "Like trouble." She raised a brow. "You've barely seen me eat." They laughed, and just like that, the awkwardness melted. Dinner wasn't what she expected. There was no pretense, no speeches about mergers or meetings. Instead, Logan asked about her childhood, her favorite books, her worst day at work. And in return, he told stories of his own, like how he once ran away from boarding school at 15 just to find out what a real hamburger tasted like, or how he still slept with a light on when he was alone. He didn't talk like a billionaire. He talked like a man who had lost things. Savannah leaned in slightly, resting her elbow on the table. "Why do you come to the cafe every day?" He stirred his glass. "Because it's the one place I feel like I'm not pretending." She frowned. "Pretending what?" "That I'm fine," he said simply. "That I enjoy being Logan Whitmore, the headline. That all this," he gestured around the rooftop, "is enough." His words sat heavily between them. "You seem like someone who has everything," she said softly. "And you seem like someone who's had to fight for everything," he replied. "That's why I keep coming back." For a moment, the clatter of plates and soft music faded. There was just silence, thick, electric, meaningful. Then a breeze drifted through the rooftop, and Savannah instinctively shivered. Without missing a beat, Logan stood, removed his jacket, and draped it gently over her shoulders. It smelled like him. Clean, warm, distant thunder. "Better?" he asked. Savannah nodded, surprised by the wave of emotion that hit her. No one had done something so simple, so kind, in years. They finished dinner slowly. Neither wanted to rush, and when they stood outside waiting for the car, neither spoke for a while. But Logan broke the silence. "I'd like to see you again." Savannah turned to him. "Why?" "Because," he said, "every time I'm around you, I stop feeling like I'm made of glass." She didn't answer right away. Her heart was thudding so hard it hurt. Instead, she looked up at the stars, at the city lights glowing beneath them, and wondered what this all meant. Could someone like her ever be part of someone like him? She wasn't sure. But when the car door opened and he offered his hand, she took it, and for the first time in a long time she wanted to see where the road might lead. The night air clung to Savannah's skin like a whisper as the car rolled through the silent city. The rhythm of the tires over pavement, the soft jazz humming through the speakers, and Logan's steady presence beside her created a strange quiet, not uncomfortable, but weighty, like something unsaid had begun to form between them. She still wore his jacket. The fabric was too big, the sleeves brushing her knuckles, but it held his warmth, and his scent, expensive cologne, but also something human beneath it. It felt ridiculous how that simple act, him placing it over her shoulders, had affected her. But in truth, she couldn't remember the last time someone had thought to protect her from something as small as the cold. And in that silence, something began to shift. When the car stopped in front of her apartment, Savannah reached for the handle, but Logan's voice halted her. "Wait." She paused, turning slightly to him. He didn't speak immediately. Instead, he studied her as if trying to memorize the way she looked in that moment. Her hair tousled by the wind, her lips parted in quiet surprise, her eyes reflecting a mixture of confusion and curiosity. "I know this is fast," he began, his voice lower than usual, "but there's something about you that unsettles me, and I don't mean in a bad way." Savannah gave a soft, skeptical laugh. "Unsettles? I've been surrounded by people my whole life," he continued. "People who want something, who expect something. I can read them in seconds, but with you—" He trailed off. "With me?" she asked gently. "I don't know what's coming next," he said, "and I like that." The air grew heavier. She wasn't sure what he meant or what he wanted, but in that moment Savannah didn't want to analyze it. She only knew that something in his eyes had changed, less guarded, less controlled, like a crack had opened, and for once he wasn't trying to seal it shut. "Good night, Logan," she said, opening the door. He didn't stop her this time, but as she stepped out, he called after her softly, "Savannah." She looked back. "Keep the jacket." The next day at the cafe, her steps were lighter, her smiles easier, until her manager pointed out she was humming out loud while grinding beans. Savannah hadn't even noticed, and when 4:07 p.m. arrived, so did Logan. But he didn't sit at his usual table. He stood by the counter. She approached with a cautious smile. "Coffee?" He shook his head. "Not today. I have a meeting uptown." Her expression faltered just slightly. "But I didn't want to miss seeing you," he added quickly. Savannah raised an eyebrow. "So you're saying I'm more important than business?" "I'm saying you make the day worth slowing down for." She didn't answer. Couldn't. Her pulse fluttered in her throat. Then, casually, he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small paper bag. "I brought you something." Suspicious, she opened it carefully. Inside was a blueberry muffin, warm. "I remembered you said they were your favorite, but the cafe here always runs out by noon. There's a bakery near my place, best in the city." She stared at it like it was a diamond. "Savannah." She looked up. "No one's ever brought me a muffin before," she whispered. He smiled, but it wasn't smug or charming. It was soft, reverent. "Well," he said, "that's officially the most tragic thing I've heard all week." That night, something small cracked open inside her. It wasn't the dinner or the jacket or even the muffin. It was the quiet, the way he listened when she spoke, the way he didn't interrupt, the way he didn't try to impress her or change her or fix her. He just saw her. 2 days later, they sat in his car again, driving nowhere in particular. Logan had asked her to join him after her shift. He'd said, "Let's just drive." No destination, just air and time. Savannah had almost said no, but she was tired of saying no to things that made her heart beat faster. They didn't talk much at first. The city passed by in streaks of gold and steel, windows reflecting lives they didn't know. Then, somewhere near the East River, Logan pulled over near a quiet pier. They walked to the edge in silence. He took off his coat and laid it over the rail, letting her lean against it without touching the cold metal. "Why me?" she asked suddenly. He didn't pretend not to understand. "I don't know," he said, "but when you hugged me that day, I felt alive, like someone had reached past the version of me people see and touched something real." Savannah's throat tightened. She didn't know how to respond to that kind of truth. "I didn't mean to," she whispered. "I know." Then came the quiet again. But this time it didn't feel uncertain. It felt sacred. They didn't kiss. They didn't touch. But their shoulders almost brushed. And in that almost, there was more electricity than any embrace could hold. Savannah closed her eyes for a moment, letting the wind whip through her hair, and she realized that for the first time in years, she wasn't thinking about bills or exhaustion or surviving. She was simply being, with him, with someone who didn't ask her to shrink or to apologize for existing. Logan looked at her then, really looked, and Savannah knew something had shifted, not by force, not by design, but by the quiet gravity of two souls who had wandered far too long in silence and finally found each other's echo. The cafe was unusually quiet when Savannah's phone rang. She was on her break, seated on the worn bench behind the kitchen, sipping cold water and trying to ignore the growing ache in her shoulders. Her manager had been short with her all day, muttering about distractions and delays, but none of that mattered when she saw the caller ID. Tyler. Her heart sank. "Ty?" she answered, instantly alert. "What's wrong?" His voice was tired, weak. "Hey, Vanna. I didn't want to worry you, but I had another episode." Savannah stood up, walking away from the door. "What kind of episode?" "Same pain," he said. "In my side. I didn't tell you last week because I didn't want to ruin your birthday, but now it's worse." "Tyler," her voice cracked, "you have to go to the hospital." "I did. They ran more tests. The doctor said my kidney function dropped again." Savannah closed her eyes, leaning against the brick wall. The air suddenly felt too thick. "They want to start prep for dialysis. Tyler added quietly, but they said it might not be enough long-term. They're talking about transplant waiting lists now. She couldn't breathe. The call ended with promises, that she'd figure it out, that everything would be okay. But as she walked back into the cafe, the world tilted sideways. The walls felt narrower, the noise too loud. She barely noticed when Logan arrived. He sat at his usual table watching her closely, and for once she didn't smile when she brought his coffee. "You okay?" he asked softly. She hesitated. No. She didn't mean to say it, but it slipped out. Raw, naked, real. Logan didn't press. He just waited. And before she realized what she was doing, Savannah sat down across from him and let it out in fragments. Her brother, the diagnosis, the costs, the months of fear, the guilt of working too much and earning too little. Her voice didn't shake until she said, "He's all I have." When she finished, she wiped her eyes quickly and stood. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have dumped that on you." But Logan didn't let her walk away. He reached into his wallet, pulled out a black card and placed it gently on the table between them. "I want to help." Savannah stared at it like it was poison. "No," she said quickly, "absolutely not. You didn't even hear what I'm offering." "I don't care," she snapped, her voice rising. "You think I'm just going to take your money because I cried over coffee. I'm not some project, or some girl you get to fix." The room fell silent. People turned. But Logan's expression didn't change. "I don't think you're a project," he said calmly. "I think you're drowning and I have a boat." Her throat tightened. "I don't want your charity." "Then don't take it as charity." He leaned forward. "Take it as an agreement. A deal." Savannah narrowed her eyes. "What kind of deal?" "I've been eating out every day for years," Logan said. "It's exhausting, cold, tasteless, no matter the cost. But your food, it reminds me of things I forgot mattered." She blinked, confused. "So here's my offer," he said. "For 1 week, 7 days, you come to my apartment and cook for me. Breakfast, lunch, dinner, nothing more. In exchange, I'll cover Tyler's medical expenses. Every cent, no questions, no strings." Savannah stared at him like he'd lost his mind. "Let me get this straight. You want me to be your private chef for a week, and in return, you'll pay for my brother's life?" Logan nodded. "Yes." She shook her head in disbelief. "Do you even hear how insane that sounds?" "It's not insane," he replied. "It's survival, for both of us." There was a beat of silence, and then he added, quieter this time, "You'll be in full control. No weird expectations, no blurred lines, just meals, and maybe some company." Savannah didn't respond. She couldn't. Her pride screamed no. But her heart, the one that had stayed up for months, wondering how she'd afford Tyler's medication, whispered maybe. She walked out without answering. That night she barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Tyler's pale face, heard the fear in his voice, and then she saw Logan, not as a billionaire, but as a man offering something without demanding anything in return. At 7:52 the next morning, she stood in front of Logan's penthouse, a glass tower scraping the sky. She wore jeans, a sweater, and her mother's locket. No makeup, no smile, just resolve. The door opened before she knocked. Logan stood there barefoot in a t-shirt and sweatpants, more human than she'd ever seen him. "You came," he said. She didn't step inside, not yet. "I'm not doing this because I need your money," she said. "I'm doing it because my brother matters more than my ego." Logan nodded. "Understood." She held his gaze. 1 week, she said. 1 week, he echoed. And when she finally walked in, something unfamiliar settled over them. Not romance, not tension, but intimacy. The kind built not on fantasy but on choice, on trust, on two people standing at the edge of something neither could name. Savannah had never seen a place like it. Logan's penthouse stretched across the entire top floor of a Manhattan skyscraper, with walls of glass that reflected the skyline like a living painting. The ceilings soared above her, and the silence, that pristine, polished kind, wrapped around everything like velvet. Her footsteps echoed faintly as she stepped inside. No dust, no clutter, no warmth. The place was beautiful, breathtaking even, but empty. Like a museum exhibit, or a life designed for looking at, not living in. She turned slowly, taking it all in. Steel fixtures, marble countertops, a glass staircase leading to a second level, and in the center of it all was him. Logan stood barefoot, coffee mug in hand, watching her from the kitchen island. He wore a dark Henley and jeans, and for once there was no trace of boardrooms or billion-dollar mergers in his appearance. Just a man, in a home that didn't feel like one. "I cleared the fridge," he said, "left the pantry as it was. And I got you this." He reached behind him and held out a small folded apron. It was navy blue, soft, new. Savannah took it carefully, almost too aware of the quiet tension between them. The deal was clear. She'd cook 3 meals a day for 1 week, nothing more. "Thanks," she said, slipping it on. "You don't have to start now," Logan added. "You can take time to settle." "I'd rather cook," she interrupted. "It helps me think." And just like that, their first morning began. She moved through his kitchen with practiced ease, her hands finding spices and chopping boards as if the room had always belonged to her. Her body remembered movements her heart didn't have time to question, the stir of a wooden spoon, the scent of garlic meeting oil, the sound of onions hitting the pan like applause. Logan watched from the dining area at first, silent, curious, respectful. It wasn't just about food. It was about watching her come alive. Savannah, for her part, ignored the pressure of being watched, until she caught his gaze resting on her with something that wasn't just interest. It was hunger, but not for food, for something deeper, something he couldn't name. She served him quietly, an herbed omelette with sautéed greens and a slice of toast with homemade jam she brought from home. He took a bite, paused, then looked up. "This tastes like memory." Savannah blinked. "That's not a normal thing to say." He smiled faintly. "It's not a normal omelette." And though she rolled her eyes, her lips twitched into something dangerously close to a smile. By day 3, the silence between them had evolved. Not the awkward, stilted kind, but the kind that holds weight. A conversation in itself. They began to exist in quiet harmony. Her cooking, him reading or working nearby. She didn't ask what he did between meetings, and he didn't pry into why she whispered her brother's name in her sleep. But the space between them began to shrink. He started lingering in the kitchen while she prepped, asking questions. "Why do you slice tomatoes like that? What's the secret to your rice? Who taught you how to knead dough?" Each answer carried a story, and Logan listened, really listened. And then, one afternoon, as she stood barefoot on the balcony sipping coffee, Logan joined her, not with words but with his silence. He handed her a blanket and wrapped it around her shoulders without comment. They stood like that, side by side, watching the world shrink beneath them. "I used to be scared of heights," he said after a while. Savannah turned to him. "What changed?" "I realized falling wasn't the worst part," he replied. "It's knowing no one will catch you." She looked away, because in that moment, she knew, neither of them was talking about rooftops. On the 5th night, she made lemon chicken with rosemary potatoes. Logan insisted they eat at the long dining table instead of the kitchen island. He lit candles. Savannah almost laughed. "This is a bit dramatic for a Thursday." "It's day 5, he said, "and I'm realizing I don't want day 7 to come." Her fork paused mid-air. He didn't take it back, didn't soften it, just looked at her with quiet, brutal honesty. "I know this wasn't meant to be anything more than a deal," he said, "but I find myself looking forward to the sound of your footsteps, the way you talk to my plants like they're people, the way you sing off-key when you think I'm asleep." Her cheeks flushed. "You leave the door open," she mumbled. "I know," he said, his voice low. Silence again. But this one buzzed. Electric. Tense. Savannah didn't respond. She finished her food, cleared the dishes, washed them with slightly more force than usual, and when she turned around, Logan was there, leaning against the counter, watching her. But he didn't touch her, didn't even step forward. "I don't expect anything, Savannah," he said. "But if I've made you uncomfortable—" "You haven't," she whispered. That hung between them, heavy, fragile. He stepped back, giving her space. "Good night," he said. She nodded, still clutching the dish rag like armor, and as he disappeared down the hallway, Savannah exhaled, not because she was relieved, but because she'd forgotten to breathe. That night, as she lay in the guest room staring at the ceiling, she realized something terrifying. She wasn't afraid of Logan touching her. She was afraid of what it would mean if he didn't. The morning of the gala, Savannah stood barefoot in Logan's kitchen, staring down at a note beside a white garment bag. No breakfast order, no instructions, just 7 words in his handwriting. "Wear this. Dinner's at 8. L." Her heart stuttered. She hadn't heard anything about an event. He hadn't mentioned plans, much less formal ones. She hesitated for a long minute before pulling the zipper down. Inside was a dress. Not just any dress. It was the color of ocean at twilight, deep, luminous, and soft to the touch, strapless with delicate boning along the waist and a cascade of silk that flowed like water. Understated elegance, not flashy, not loud, but breathtaking. At the bottom of the bag, tucked into tissue paper, were a pair of silver heels and a matching clutch. Savannah touched the fabric as if it might vanish under her fingers. He thought of this, chose this, for her. And yet, the familiar voice returned, the one that always whispered she didn't belong in places like this, that people would stare, that no dress could ever hide the fact she was different. But then she remembered Logan's words a few nights before. "You belong anywhere you decide to walk into." She took a deep breath and decided to walk in. At 7:58 p.m., Logan was waiting in the marble foyer, dressed in a charcoal tuxedo, no tie, his shirt collar slightly undone, hair swept back, calm, but the moment she descended the staircase, his breath visibly caught. He didn't speak for a second. Then softly, "You're going to ruin this evening for every woman in the room." Savannah laughed under her breath, but her cheeks flushed. "I don't know how to do this," she admitted. "You don't have to," he said. "Just stay beside me." The gala was held in an art museum temporarily transformed into a stage for wealth and ego. Crystal chandeliers hung above marble floors, violins played softly in the background, and champagne flowed like water. Savannah tried to steady her breathing. Logan's hand rested gently on the small of her back, grounding her, guiding her through the maze of investors, politicians, and magazine editors. He introduced her as a friend, no elaboration, no apology. At first, the curious glances came quietly. Then came the whispers. She could feel them at her back, the questions, the disapproval. She was too plain, too quiet, too real, but she stayed upright. Because Logan never left her side. Until he had to. A sudden call from the board dragged him toward a private conversation across the room. 2 minutes, he promised. "I'll be right back." Savannah nodded, clutching her clutch tightly. That's when she appeared. Vanessa Kingsley, elegant, tall, ice blonde, designer gown. The kind of woman who belonged in those circles. Logan's ex. She appeared from the side, a flute of champagne in hand, her smile already curved like a dagger. "Oh," she said, eyes raking over Savannah. "I was told Logan brought a guest. I assumed it was a date, not charity." Savannah blinked. "Excuse me?" Vanessa tilted her head. "No offense, I'm sure you're very sweet. Probably have a lovely little story about how you met. A misunderstanding at the airport? Something adorably beneath him." Savannah's jaw clenched. Her throat burned. She should have walked away, but Vanessa wasn't finished. "Do you know how many women have tried to get close to him?" she said, voice syrupy. "You think a dress and a week of homemade meals makes you special?" Savannah steadied herself. "No," she said calmly. "I think what makes me special is that I don't care what people like you think." That struck a nerve. Vanessa's lips curled. But before she could reply, Logan was there. And he'd heard everything. "Vanessa," he said sharply, "walk away." She turned, caught off guard. "This doesn't concern you." Logan stepped between them, his voice ice. "It concerns me when someone I once respected chooses to humiliate someone I care about." Savannah froze. "Someone I care about." The room fell still, heads turned. The tension hummed. Vanessa huffed, her pride stung, and walked off, heels clacking like gunshots on marble. Logan turned to Savannah, his expression unreadable. "I'm sorry." She didn't respond. He reached for her hand. She didn't pull away. "I didn't come here to be protected," she said finally. "I know," he replied, "but I came here to protect you anyway." That night, they left early, not because of the stares or the whispers, but because Logan wanted to. He called for the car and wrapped his jacket around her again, just like he did that first night. In the back seat, their hands brushed once, then again. This time, she didn't move hers away. Back at the penthouse, Savannah walked to the window and stood quietly, her reflection layered over the Manhattan skyline. She felt him step behind her, not touching, just there. "Why did you defend me like that?" she asked. His voice was soft. "Because you were the only person in that room worth defending." The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It was heavy, real, loaded. Savannah turned slightly, looking over her shoulder. "I'm not who people expect to see with you." Logan stepped closer. "I don't want what people expect." Their eyes met, and for the first time there was no running, no confusion, just two people from different worlds, standing on the same line, wondering what would happen if they stepped over it. It started with a photo. Savannah didn't even know who took it. Maybe a reporter, maybe just someone at the gala with a phone and no boundaries. But by the next morning, it was everywhere. Logan Whitmore's mystery date, from cafe girl to penthouse princess. New flame or new favor? The article wasn't cruel on the surface, but the comments were. Savannah sat at the edge of Logan's couch, phone clutched in hand, scrolling through hundreds of faceless judgments. Gold digger alert. She probably pours his coffee real slow, if you know what I mean. What's next? Is she going to get the company too? Girl from the slums finally gets her upgrade. Some were worse, much worse. Each word carved into her like glass. Logan was in a meeting, one of those high-stakes billion-dollar calls he handled without blinking, and she sat in his penthouse, surrounded by glass walls and sky, feeling like she was drowning in air. She tried to eat, couldn't, tried to cook, failed. At noon, she left. The park was nearly empty, save for joggers and a few parents chasing toddlers around the fountain. Savannah sat on a worn bench in the shade, her phone buzzing every few minutes with new notifications. She had posted nothing, said nothing, but still, people had found her, dug up old photos from college, commented on her family, even on Tyler. She turned the phone off. Then she cried. Not the soft, elegant kind of crying they show in movies, but the real, body-racking kind, the kind that starts in the throat and breaks something open in the chest. All she had done was say yes to a dinner, to a week of cooking, to someone who made her feel seen. Now the world was tearing her apart for it. She didn't hear Logan approach. She only noticed when his shadow fell across her knees. She looked up, wiping her face with the back of her sleeve. "How'd you find me?" "I guessed," he said simply. She didn't say anything. Logan sat beside her, close, but not touching. "I saw the articles." "You should be in damage control right now," she said, her voice hollow. "I am." She turned to him, confused. "I'm here," he said. Her eyes welled again, but this time with anger. "Why didn't you tell me this would happen? Why didn't you prepare me?" "I didn't think it would blow up like this," he admitted. "No," she snapped. "You didn't think about me at all." That silenced him. "I'm not built for this, Logan," she continued, voice breaking. "I don't know how to live in your world. I don't have the skin for it, or the background, or the filters." She stood, pacing. "I've worked for everything I've ever had, every cent. And now, overnight, I'm just another girl on his arm to people I've never even met." He rose slowly. "You think I don't know how cruel the world can be? You think I haven't been torn apart in headlines? But you're used to it," she shouted. "You have the armor, I don't." Logan looked at her then, really looked, and what she saw in his face wasn't anger or confusion. It was pain. "You think I chose this life?" he said quietly. "You think I like being watched, analyzed, picked apart? You think I sleep well in a glass box while everyone decides if I'm still worth admiring the next day?" She froze. "Do you want to know why I kept coming back to that cafe?" he continued. "Because you were the first person in years who didn't look at me like Logan Whitmore. You looked at me like a man, like someone who could make a mistake, someone who could laugh." He stepped closer, his voice softer now. "I didn't fall for you because of how you made coffee, Savannah. I fell because of how you made me feel." Tears spilled down her cheeks again. "I'm scared," she whispered. "I know," he replied. "So am I." A long silence settled between them, heavy with all the things they hadn't said. Then Savannah took a shaky breath. "This isn't what I wanted." "What did you want?" Logan asked. She looked up at him, eyes searching. "I just wanted something real." Logan's voice was barely audible. "Then don't run from it now." Another silence, but this one was different, charged. Finally, she stepped back. "I need time," she said. "I need space to think." He nodded. "I'll wait." Savannah hesitated, then turned and walked away, her figure growing smaller against the late afternoon light, the wind catching her dress like a sigh. Logan didn't follow. He just stood there, heart hammering. And somewhere deep down, he knew. This wasn't the end. It was the pause before everything changed. Savannah didn't expect to return to the cafe. But 3 days after the confrontation in the park, she found herself back behind the counter, apron tied tight, hair up in a knot, like nothing had happened. Like her life hadn't unraveled in the middle of a public park, beside a man she could no longer look at without feeling everything at once. The shift passed in a blur. Customers came and went. Tips clinked in the jar. No one mentioned her face in the tabloids, maybe because no one cared. Maybe because they all had their own stories to survive. She was mopping the back floor when her phone buzzed. Email from Tyler Reed. Subject: "You're not going to like this." Her stomach sank. She opened the message. Inside was a link, an old news article, dated 5 years earlier. The headline hit like a slap. "Whitmore Holdings acquires 14th Street block. Historic local businesses shut down." She clicked, scrolled, and there it was. A list of the closed businesses, including Reed's Diner, her family's restaurant, the one her parents built from scratch, the one where Savannah learned to cook, learned to serve, learned to matter, the one that shuttered in a single week, without warning. She stared at the screen, nausea rising. Logan's company, his signature, his decision. Her knees buckled slightly, and she caught herself against the counter. Her thoughts blurred, flashing between memories, her mother crying silently in the kitchen, her father's voice breaking when he told her they were out of time. And now, Logan. Quiet, kind-eyed Logan. The man who made her feel safe. The man who took it all away. And never told her. The elevator ride to the penthouse was silent. She didn't text, didn't call. She just walked past the doorman, with eyes that told him not to ask questions. Logan opened the door within seconds. He looked surprised but not relieved. There was something unsettled in him too, as if he'd been waiting for a storm. "I didn't expect to see you," he said gently. She held up her phone, screen glowing. "You knew," she said. "Didn't you?" He didn't answer right away. That was all the confirmation she needed. Savannah stepped inside, jaw tight, voice shaking. "My family lost everything. My parents fell apart trying to keep that diner alive. I spent years believing we failed because we weren't strong enough, because we weren't smart enough." She looked at him with wide, wounded eyes. "But it was you." "I didn't know," Logan said quietly. "Not then. Not when it happened." Her laugh was sharp, bitter. "But you know now." "I found out last week," he admitted. "I had no idea there was a connection. I didn't handle that acquisition personally. My father, he was still active in the company back then. I didn't look at the names. I just signed what he pushed across my desk." "That's convenient," she said. He took a step forward. "It's not an excuse, it's the truth." Savannah's voice cracked. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I didn't want to lose you," he whispered. She flinched. Too late. The words landed like a gavel. Logan swallowed hard, struggling to find air. "I've spent years building things," he said softly. "Towers, empires. But the only thing that's ever felt like home is you." She looked away. That was worse than shouting, worse than denial, because it sounded real. He reached into the inside pocket of his blazer and pulled out a folder. "I had my legal team pull the records," he said. "Your family was never properly compensated. The restaurant was undervalued and shut down without negotiation. It was wrong." He handed her the folder. She didn't take it. "I signed a transfer this morning," he added. "The deed, the land, everything. It's in your name now." Her breath caught. "What?" "I gave it back," Logan said simply. "It's yours, to reopen, or tear down, or leave empty. I just thought maybe it could be a way to rebuild something your family loved, something they lost because of me." Savannah stared at him, trembling. "I don't want your guilt," she said. "It's not guilt," he replied. "It's reparation." The word hung in the air, heavy and raw. "I didn't fall for you because I felt bad," he continued. "I fell because even when you were angry, even when you were hurt, you were still the strongest person I'd ever met." Silence. Savannah walked to the window, pressing a hand to the glass. The city glittered beneath her, cold and sharp. She didn't know what to believe anymore. Her heart was a storm, every memory tainted, every word echoing louder than the last. But the truth was this: Logan hadn't asked for forgiveness, he had acted. And deep down, that shook her more than anything. Because it meant he wasn't trying to win her. He was trying to make something right, and somehow that made it harder to hate him. She didn't turn around, didn't speak, just stood there, staring out at a city that had taken everything from her once, and now maybe was giving something back. It was just past midnight when Savannah's phone rang. She almost didn't answer. She was sitting cross-legged on the floor of her tiny apartment, staring blankly at the deed Logan had signed over to her, the one that held the ghost of her family's past, now somehow in her hands again. But then the screen lit up. Tyler. Her heart dropped. "Vanna." His voice was strained, distant. "It's bad. The pain's worse than ever. I think something's wrong." She didn't ask questions. She grabbed her keys, called an ambulance, and ran. By the time she arrived at the hospital, Tyler was already in a room, pale and curled in agony. The nurse handed her a clipboard. She filled out the forms with trembling hands, skipping the insurance section entirely because there was no policy, no coverage, just hope. The doctor appeared 20 minutes later, expression grim. "He's experiencing acute kidney failure," he said. "His levels have dropped drastically. We'll need to operate. Tonight." Savannah's knees went weak. I can't pay for this," she whispered. "I don't have—" "We can stabilize him for now," the doctor said carefully. "But surgery, medications, follow-up dialysis, it's expensive. I'm sorry." She turned to Tyler's room, where her brother, her brave, smart, stubborn brother, lay with his eyes half open and fear clouding his face. "I'll find a way," she said. She stepped into the hallway and did the one thing she swore she wouldn't do again. She called Logan. He didn't answer on the first ring, or the second, but on the third his voice came through, hoarse, alert. "Savannah?" Her words came in a rush, barely controlled. "Tyler's in the hospital. His kidneys. He needs emergency surgery. I don't know what to do. I don't have time. I'm coming." Click. No hesitation, no questions. 45 minutes later, Logan arrived. Not in a suit, not in his usual polished perfection. He wore a black t-shirt and jeans, hair still messy from sleep, eyes bloodshot from the rush. He didn't stop at the desk. He didn't ask for permission. He found Savannah in the waiting room and walked straight to her. "I already called my team," he said. "They're wiring payment directly. No one touches a scalpel until he's got the best surgeon available." Her lips trembled. "You didn't have to—" "Yes, I did." He placed a hand on her shoulder, steadying her. "I told you," he said, voice low. "I'll always show up for you." And then, as if the strength left her all at once, Savannah broke. Right there in the fluorescent-lit hallway, she crumbled against his chest, and he caught her like he'd been waiting to do it all along. No one looked, no one interrupted. It was just her sobs against his heart, his arms around her, his chin resting gently atop her head. The hours passed in slow motion, Logan didn't leave, not when the nurses wheeled Tyler into surgery, not when the doctor came back, gloves still on, to report that everything had gone well. "He's stable," he said. "The damage was severe, but we got to it in time. He'll need a long recovery, but he's going to be okay." Savannah exhaled with a sound that was part laugh, part collapse. She turned to Logan, and this time she didn't hold back. She wrapped her arms around his neck, buried her face against him and whispered, "Thank you." But Logan didn't say "You're welcome." He said, "You're not alone anymore." And those 4 words shattered something in her, something heavy she'd carried for years, maybe all her life. They stayed the night at the hospital. Savannah refused to leave Tyler's side. Logan stayed in the hallway, stretched out on a stiff chair, his blazer folded into a makeshift pillow. In the early hours of the morning, Savannah stepped out of the room and found him there, asleep, his legs too long for the seat, his hand still holding his phone with the screen open to her contact. She stood there watching him, the quiet hum of machines in the background. This man, who lived in penthouses and boardrooms, had come running at 1 a.m. for her brother, had signed away real estate to right a wrong he didn't even cause, had stood by her when the world had mocked her, and never once asked for anything in return. Savannah sat down beside him, barely making a sound. Logan stirred, eyes fluttering open. "You stayed," she whispered. "Of course I did." She looked at him, really looked, and for the first time saw not the billionaire, not the man from the magazines, but the truth of him. Tired, unfiltered, real, and in that moment something inside her gave way. "I think I'm in love with you," she said softly, like a secret, like a confession not meant for daylight. Logan's breath caught. He didn't speak. He reached for her hand, and just held it, tightly, like he'd never let go. Savannah stood alone in the doorway of the old building on 14th Street. The sign had been repainted, the rusted gate removed. Inside, sunlight streamed through new windows and settled on polished tile. Everything looked different, cleaner, brighter, but the bones were still the same. She walked in slowly, heels clicking on the floor, hands trailing over the walls like she was greeting an old friend. It had taken months of quiet renovation. Logan had insisted she take the lead. No architects, no design firms, just her and the memories she chose to bring back. And now, Reed's Diner was ready to reopen. But she wasn't thinking about menus or hours of operation. She was thinking about how far she'd come, and the man who helped her get here, without ever trying to own it. Later that evening, she returned to the penthouse. Tyler was recovering well. Her shifts at the cafe had ended. Her apartment lease was up. And yet, her heart still hadn't fully settled, as if waiting for one more page to turn. Logan was in the kitchen, sleeves rolled, attempting to cook pasta with more concentration than most CEOs gave to billion-dollar contracts. Savannah leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, amused. "Didn't we agree you're better at eating than cooking?" Logan glanced over his shoulder. "I'm learning, slowly, mostly so you don't think I'll starve when you're not around." Her smile softened. She stepped inside, took the spoon from his hand, and stirred the sauce with practiced ease. "You always do that," he murmured. "Do what?" "Walk into my life like it was always yours." She didn't answer, just reached for a plate, served 2 portions, and gestured to the dining table. They sat together, the night warm and quiet around them, the city blinking beyond the windows, and for a while they just ate. No pressure, no talk of the past or future, just being. Until Logan reached into his pocket, not dramatically, not on one knee, not with music or candles. He simply placed a small velvet box between them. Savannah froze. He opened it. Inside was a ring, not massive, not flashy, but delicate, thoughtful. A single diamond in a vintage gold setting that looked like it had been found, not bought. Logan looked at her, not nervous, not rehearsed, just sure. "I don't want to marry you because it makes sense," he said. "I want to marry you because nothing made sense until you walked into my life and hugged the wrong man." Her eyes flooded instantly. "Logan, I want a life with you, not a brand, not a headline, just dinners and hard days and arguments over how much salt goes in the potatoes, She laughed through tears. "I want your laughter in my kitchen, your socks on my floor, your name on every mailbox, every lease, every emergency contact form." Savannah covered her mouth, overwhelmed. "You don't have to decide now," he added gently, "but I needed to ask, because I'm not interested in almosts anymore." She didn't wait. She reached across the table, picked up the ring, and slipped it on her finger with shaking hands. Then she looked at him, truly looked, and nodded, her voice trembling. "Yes." Logan let out a breath that sounded like relief and home and awe, all wrapped into one. He stood, walked around the table, and pulled her into a slow, grounding embrace. No firework kiss, no cinematic spin, just arms around arms, breath against skin, real, true, chosen. Later that night, Savannah lay beside him in bed, her head on his chest, the ring glinting in the soft light. "Do you think the world will ever understand us?" she asked sleepily. Logan brushed her hair back. "I don't care," he whispered, "because you understand me." She smiled, eyes drifting shut. And for the first time in her life, Savannah Reed slept not out of exhaustion, but out of peace. Spring arrived in New York with quiet grace, not the loud bloom of movies, but the subtle kind, softer winds, longer light, and petals falling like confetti from trees along the sidewalks. And somewhere just outside the city, in a private garden surrounded by ivy-covered walls and rows of wildflowers, Savannah Reed stood barefoot on the grass, holding a bouquet of lavender and white lilies. It wasn't a royal wedding. It wasn't televised. It didn't have designer gowns or paparazzi at the gates. It was small, intimate, sacred, just like her love. Tyler was the one who walked her down the aisle. His suit was a little too big, and he limped slightly from weeks of recovery, but he held his head high, eyes proud and misty. Savannah held his arm with both hands, whispering, "Don't you dare cry first." He laughed through his tears. No promises. The guests were few, a handful of close friends, a nurse or two from the hospital who had grown fond of them, and the cafe manager who had since apologized more than once. But no one mattered more than the man waiting beneath the arch of willow branches. Logan Whitmore, dressed in a soft grey suit, no tie, sleeves slightly rolled at the cuffs. He looked like himself, not the billionaire, not the public figure, but the man Savannah had learned to trust, to love, to believe in. When he saw her, he smiled with the kind of stillness that only happens when the world stops moving for one quiet, perfect second. Savannah had never been more sure of anything in her life. The vows were handwritten. Logan spoke first. "I've made a life out of being right, calculated, distant. And then you hugged me by mistake and ruined all my defenses in 5 seconds." Laughter rippled through the crowd. "But what you didn't know," he continued, eyes locked on hers, "was that I'd been waiting for that mistake my entire life. Waiting for someone who didn't see my net worth first, who didn't want to fix me or use me, but who looked at me and just saw a man, a flawed one who burns toast and forgets appointments and still leaves the water running." Savannah smiled, tears threatening. "You didn't just change my world, Savannah. You gave it meaning." Then it was her turn. She took a breath. "I never dreamed of mansions or rings or fairy tales," she said. "I dreamed of safety, of being heard, of sitting in silence next to someone who doesn't try to fill it, but understands it." She paused, voice shaking. "And then you showed up in my life, arrogant and beautiful, and I thought, absolutely not." The guests laughed again. "But then you didn't leave. You showed up, over and over, not just in moments of joy, but in the ugliest parts. You didn't ask me to be perfect. Have you asked me to be real? And I fell in love with you, not because you're powerful, but because you're gentle." Logan's eyes burned. She whispered, "I choose you. Today, tomorrow, always." The officiant barely finished the final words before Logan kissed her, slow, certain, and full of every promise he had no words for. The guests stood and applauded. Tyler whistled loudest, and Savannah, now Savannah Whitmore, laughed against her husband's lips. At the small reception under the garden lights, Logan pulled her aside for a quiet moment. "I have one last surprise," he said. She gave him a mock glare. "You've already given me too many." He handed her a small envelope. Inside was a press release. He had scheduled a live press conference to go public, not with another corporate merger, but with a message. Savannah frowned. "You don't have to do this. You don't owe the world an explanation." "I know," he said, "but I owe you the truth." Loudly. A week later, headlines flooded social media. Logan Whitmore declares love publicly. "Savannah is not a fairy tale. She's my reality. I didn't save her. She saved me. CEO shuts down rumors with grace and fire." But Savannah didn't care. She was too busy setting the tables at the newly reopened Reed's Diner, which now had a corner booth reserved permanently for Logan. A small plaque above it read, "Where the coffee first changed everything." Sometimes they cooked together, even when it was a mess. Sometimes they fought over playlists or how much garlic was too much. Sometimes Logan burned toast. But every night, when they turned off the lights and slipped beneath the sheets, Savannah felt the same thing she felt the first time he held her in that hospital hallway. She was finally safe, finally chosen, finally home, all because of a single mistaken hug. That led her to the kind of love that never lets go. Not all love starts with a glance. Sometimes it begins with a mistake. Savannah never imagined that a wrong hug could place her at the center of a story that would challenge everything: pride, past, fear, and even her own heart. But when someone chooses to stay even after seeing your flaws, is that still luck? Or is it love? And you? Could you trust someone who hurt you unintentionally if that someone was also the only one capable of healing you completely? If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and let us know in the comments, where are you listening to this story from? Your like helps this channel grow and keep bringing emotional stories like this one. Share with someone special.